Hey guys, I hope you're all well, enjoying self-isolation. The main thing is here, there's no excuse now for the still life competition. You've all got plenty of time, plenty of stuff we can do. So one of the questions that Dave asked me if I could cover is how to do a still life with a single flash. So I'm going to cover a couple of things. A single flash on top of the camera, if that's all you've got, if you've got no way of remotely triggering it. Then a little bit, if you can take the flash off the camera to trigger it remotely. And finally, two flashes, a couple of things you can do with that. So no real specialist equipment here, just two standard speed lights, the flashes that go on top of the camera. I use a brand called Godox. I recommend it. It's sensibly priced compared to something like a Canon, Sony, Nikon, Olympus flash. Does a great job, and you can buy triggers for it to trigger them remotely, so they can go on the camera or remote, and they're a really nice piece of kit. I try and put some links on to this sort of stuff at the end of the video so you can see where to buy it. Okay, my setup here, I've got just an old Olympus OM2, used to be my dad's. Classic camera there as my subject, just on the dining room table. Now a couple of things here, I've got space, you notice, between the edge of the table and the wall. I'm lucky enough to have a plain wall I can shoot into. You can have a seamless background that shoots right up, it comes right up, but this method works just as well, and by having a gap between, you've got less chance of having shadow. If you was having an issue with a light and you're having shadows falling off the back, by moving it to the back there, like that, you're gonna reduce any shadows in from behind. So that's a nice little trick to do. The base, look, can just be anything, can be a white tablecloth. This is a bit of vinyl, but can be anything. Again, the wall, you can have a backdrop if you want, but if you've got a plain wall, it doesn't have to be plain. A patterned wallpaper or something can work well, but no matter what colour your wall is, I'm going to show you a couple of tricks at the end just to change that background quite easily if you've got access to two different speed lights. So, without further ado, let's crack on, see where this takes us. Okay, so here we are with a single light on camera flash setup. First off, as a reference point, I'm going to show you just on aperture priority, auto ISO with no flash, just so we can see what we're getting. You can pretty much see the image. I've got the image live streaming through to the iPad there, so you can get a gauge on what that's like. But let's go ahead and take a shot anyway and see what we get. Should be able to do this remotely. There we go, and we've got that image there coming straight through. So you can see that's just with natural window light, no flash. It's quite heavy around there. We've got no kind of detail there where the light's being blocked there. So let's see if we can introduce some light and see if we can improve that. And like I say, we're going to start off with an on-camera flash, keeping it nice and simple. Okay, so we've got two light sources that are available to us. We've got the natural window light that's coming in that you see hitting me here, and obviously we've got our flash. Now the thing we need to ask ourselves is, do we want to include both of those light sources? Do we want the window light as an addition to the flash? Now the advantage of using the window light in addition is you've got this natural light coming in already, and the flash can just fill in on the side of that, so you're using two light sources. The big disadvantage is you have very little control over that light. So if the cloud comes over, or it's a different weather or anything like that, or even if you want to come back and leave this for an hour and come back after dinner, all that light's gone and it's changed. If you use just the flash, although you're only relying on one light source, you can replicate that at any time. So it doesn't matter if that's 2 o'clock on a sunny afternoon or in a closed room, 9 o'clock in the middle of winter, makes no difference. You're only relying on that one light source, so it's easily replicated. So settings on your camera. An easy one is a good starting point. It's going to be different depending on how much light you've got coming in, but a good starting point is 1/25 of a second, ISO 125. So 125, 125, easy to remember. Your your aperture, you're going to set that to whatever is applicable to you, whatever you want. That's going to obviously control your depth of field, but also that's going to control the ambient light coming in. If you're in a closed room, it's fine, you can have it whatever you want. If you have, like me, got a lot of window light coming in, I'm going to need to set that around 5.6 f8 or something. Actually, I'm going to change my other settings as well to compensate for that light coming in. But the idea is you can have a look and use whatever settings are applicable to you. The key thing with your shutter speed, you can't afford to go over 250th of a second, because you're going to get syncing issues whereby the shutter can't keep track of the flash coming in. So without going into too much detail, try and avoid going over 250th of a second, or 200th of a second if you're shooting on a Canon. But that aside, as long as you stick to that main one, then have a play about and use the settings that are applicable to you. But as I say, good starting point, 1/25th of a second, ISO 125. So we can see here, we've got a bit of reflection there, but we've got ISO is 50, we're at f5.6 and 160th of a second, and we're in complete darkness. Now, just to show you of something I'd never ever do, but just for the point of the exercise, I've got the flash pointing directly at my subject, and I've got the flash on ETTL. I have no idea how this is going to turn out, so let's just take a shot and see what happens there. Well, it's kind of to be expected. That's pretty dire. It's underexposed, but aside from that, it's pretty awful lighting. It's just firing direct, but the ETTL has seen all the white background and everything, and just cut that exposure down. Has not compensated for the actual subject at all. So that's a kind of worst case scenario. So let's see how we can improve on that, eh? Okay, so what I've done, I've precariously put a reflector up to the side of the camera, and I've angled the flash to point at the reflector. Now, at that kind of range, I'm going to get a bit of spill from that flash. Remember, it's not going to be a direct narrow beam, so I'm going to get some what we call feathering off to the side, but most of the light is going to hit that reflector first and come in from the side. Now my flash now is on manual as well. I've put that on a half. If you're shutting the light right out by closing down your aperture, you're going to need more flash power. But if you're unsure of the power settings, just try it. Just, whack it up to full power, take it down to 128, try the different settings and see what works. But I just know from experience that shutting down the light that much, we're going to need quite a healthy chunk of power. So I put that at a half. My camera settings haven't changed at all, so we can see there we're still at a 50th, ISO 50, 1/60th second, and ISO 5.6. So we're gonna take that shot. And there we go. It's not too dissimilar to the natural light one, which is kind of to be expected because you're using a big light source, which is the reflector. Remember, your flash is no longer the primary light source, it's the reflector, because it's the flash is hitting that first. So that's your primary light source, the reflector. And that's kind of mimicking the window light. So the results are kind of to be expected. Still got some room for improvement. I'm still kind of quite blocky here. But now, because we've got our own light source and we're not relying on where the window is, we can swap this around. So if we swap the reflector to the other side, point the flash in the other direction, and we see if we can fill in this little spot here. So let's give that a go. Okay, so I haven't changed any of my settings at all. All I've done is just swap that reflector around to the other side, pointed the flash in the other direction. Let's have a look on here and see what we get. Okay, now this is different now. The light here is pretty much the same on this side, but here, see how we brought this detail out in here? Compared to the other one, we'd lost all that detail around there, it was all quite dark, but we've lit that, we've filled in that space there, so we're getting detail in there. It's still far from perfect, but with the limitations of one light on camera, it's possibly about as good as you're going to get. It needs a bit of fixing in post to, it's probably a little over, so I think where I've moved that reflector, I could probably do with turning that flash down a little touch. Actually, let me just do that now and we'll see what we get. So I'm going to go back there, bear with me. Manually turn that flash down to just over a quarter. Let's see what we get there. There we go, that's not bad. So again, we've got detail in all the places, and that's just from a single light source on camera. Okay, now if we can take the flash off of the camera and trigger it remotely, this is when things start to get a bit more interesting, because you've got complete flexibility. You're not tied to having that light source directly facing or the constraints of an on-camera flash. So as an example for this, I've got the reflector virtually pointing back towards the camera and the light source coming in behind. That's going to do two things. It's going to give us a bit of backlight on the camera. It's going to hit the reflector and obviously then come back and hit the front of the subject. But also with the background, because I'm not spilling light directly onto the background, it's going to, the background's hardly going to be illuminated at all. Just with that, only with that field light coming back, it's going to create the background, make the background quite dark in comparison to what we had. So here we go. Settings haven't changed. Let's just fire that one and we'll see what we get. There you can see, so you've got a different look to that background. It's more of you can see the separation there, whereas before when you light in the background, it was hard to see that line. Purely personal choice. You might prefer the previous one when the flash is firing from the front and light in the background. But again, we've got detail. We've filled in the shadows. It's a little bright here. There's some things we can do to alleviate that. But the key thing is you've got complete flexibility. You can move it around to the position that suits best. Angle it up, angle it down, put gobos in the way to kind of block some of the light hitting different bits. So we can have a play about with that and just see where it takes us. But like I say, the key thing is you're just not tied to having that flash stuck on top of the camera. Okay, so what I've got here is the flash pointing higher up, pointing to hit the back wall there. You can see, so it's quite high up. It's going to hit that reflector, but also it's going to hit the back wall. Now I've changed the zoom on this to 20mm, so it's going to spray out everywhere. So we're going to get some that's going to drop down on the top of the subject, some that's going to hit, most of it's going to kind of hit that reflector and back wall. So the light's going to be quite evenly spread. But what it's going to do is, in comparison to the other shot, previous shot, it's going to really light that back wall and gives a completely different look. So let's give that a go. By the way, although you can see the camera and everything quite clear, the subject quite clearly there, that's the ambience playing no part. That's the camera electronically highlighting that image. If I switch the flash off, it would just be in complete darkness. But let's give that a go. So now we've got quite a high key image with a single light source. Bearing in mind, this is just tabletop. We haven't got like a seamless background or anything, but we've lost a lot of that line between the two. It's quite faint, the line between the background and the floor. Quite easy fixed in post if you want to do that, but it's really kind of isolated the image. We've got very little shadow, and that's because putting the zoom of the flash on a wider angle, it's eliminated all the shadows. It's filled in pretty much everywhere. It's not the most dynamic image because it does render it quite flat, but we have got still a little bit of shadow there that is quite nice. But as a single flash shot, that's not bad. Okay, if you have got the facility to get a bit more ambitious and you want to use a couple of lights, don't be put off by this. I've got still a standard speed light, like the same flash I had on top of the camera. I've just put it into a softbox. That can be a cheap softbox. You can get them off of Amazon or eBay really quite cheaply these days. So I've got one light there, and that's purely focusing on the camera, on the subject, I should say. And then out of shot, you can't see underneath the table. I've got another light, another speed light, exactly the same, firing against the back wall. So that's going to illuminate the back wall different to. I haven't got to worry about that back wall. Rather, I can put as much or as little power on that without adversely affecting my subject. And the same with the light on the subject, it's not affecting the back wall too much. So let's just take this shot and show you that. So I've retained the detail here, but it's give the back wall a very similar colour. I could actually tone, if I turn that flash down actually for hitting the back wall, I could probably try and match that colour, so you'd probably get a seamless, completely seamless background there. But that's not bad. I'm quite happy with that shot. The idea is that I want to get is that I want it to be well lit, but I want shadow detail. I want it to be darker over this side than over here. You want to see that it's there's a light source coming from a direction to give that illusion from its window light, even if it's not, rather than a completely flat. If I wanted it completely flat, I could have just bounced a flash off the ceiling and give a huge light source, no shadows, light everywhere, everything perfectly evenly lit, but it'd be pretty dull. So we want to have a little bit of depth to it, which is why it's important to retain these shadows around here. Whatever it is you're going to be photographing, the shadows is the one thing you've got to watch in terms of, it's okay you place one thing there. As soon as you introduce something else into the image, one is going to create shadows off the other, and that's going to be your biggest struggle a lot of times. You want shadows, but you want them in the right places, and you don't necessarily want shadows from one subject hitting another. That's why I chose something with a more of an unusual shape rather than just a mug or something that hasn't got a lot to give shadow. I knew we was going to get shadow from the lens onto the motor drive there. So just for something different, I'm going to put, that's just a sheet of red acetate, get it from anywhere. It's specific camera filter, but I'm just going to try this. That's just a clip really to hold it onto the front of the flash. I've got one I can just show you there. There, you can see that will just clip onto the front like that. So I'm going to pop that onto the flash that's underneath the table there. Just quickly pop that on. Simple as that. I'm going to need to, because I've put that gel on the front of it, I'm going to need to increase the power of that one. So I'm just going to do that on top of the camera. Turn that up to a half. And let's see what we get when we take this shot. So let's get back there. Let's see what difference putting that red gel makes. There, look at that. So we've completely changed the tone of that background just really by putting that coloured gel on. So that can be anything you want. You can do anything with that back. For me, that's not the best image. I'm not keen on the red and white, but it just goes to show that you can create whatever you want just by adapting your lights. Now I'm going to show you something now that I think is quite interesting. You don't realise necessarily how much our key light here is affecting the background, how much spill, but this will just show you as an experiment how much the light, your key light, is bouncing around the whole room and affecting everything. So I'm literally just going to turn that off. So now the only light source is going to be the backlight, and let's see what we get. How's about that? So that's when you're only relying on the backlight. So you see, the only difference I made was switching off this main light, and it's completely drains out the colour from that gel. There's a couple of things we could do to, if we wanted that background and that look, we wouldn't use a softbox. We could use a narrow spot just to pick out the camera, and maybe I'll give that a go. Okay guys, so what we've got here, still the 2 flashes. So the one behind the table with the red gel one, haven't changed that at all. I've just got another one here, and you'll see I've got 2 grids on it. Just run them off so you can see this little honeycomb grid there to narrow that beam. So you can see it's directly, let's move that up, directly pointing straight on the same axis as the camera. I've got this on a really low setting because it's nice and close and it's full on flash. So we're on a 64th, and you see my zoom is at 200. I don't want any spill whatsoever. All the light coming out of that, I want to just hit the camera, the subject. I keep saying the camera, and obviously I understand that's confusing because you don't know if I'm talking about the camera I'm shooting on or the subject. Note to oneself, choose a different subject next time. Anyway, I just want all that light source to hit the camera over there. So let's come over to the iPad and see what we get. So we've got 1 red gel behind, a light source just hitting the subject. So click on that, see what we get. How's that? It may look a complex setup. It's not really. The grids, you know what? You can make that yourself with a bit of black card and just narrow that beam. The whole point of it is you just want to narrow that beam so it's only hitting your subject. The red gel is just acetate that you can get from anywhere, and you can be velcroed sellotape to the front of your flash. Nothing complex. If you've got 2 flashes, stuff like this is easily achievable. But yeah, just have fun with it. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Email address below. Stay healthy. Look forward to seeing you at the Camera Club on the other side of this little blip. Thanks, guys.